opportunity to speak to you all.
Oh,
Thank
welcome,
you.
sir. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. Yes, my name is Damien. I'm best known for writing for The Guardian. I've been writing science fiction criticism there and for the BBC and Wired magazine for some years. Give me 1 second here. Thank you. I was actually very fortunate to begin my career working in the city of Leicester in the UK as a librarian, and Leicester has one of the biggest Indian communities in the world, and I attended many fantastic mushaira and readings of poetry as part of my work there. And I've also been fortunate to travel in India in 2014. And now I live in Bali, which has a very active Hindu culture. And I think it's fair to say that the Hindu mythology is the greatest living mythology in the world. That when I've traveled around India and living in Bali now, that the mythos of Hinduism is lived through the culture in a very different way than in Western society now, where the old mythologies have been, you might say, lost or abandoned or are dead or are no longer truly lived. In fact, one of my friends here, Faraz, who's Indian of Muslim origin, when I first met him over tea, and I explained to him my interest in science fiction, he said, yes, you people need new mythologies because you've lost your old ones. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about science fiction as a mythology, and very much the way that this has played out in Western culture. J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings, was very aware of the loss of mythology in Western culture. And he invented the term mythopoeia to create a new mythology for the modern world. And that's what he attempted to do in Lord of the Rings. And he drew on lots of old mythologies from Nordic cultures and old English myths and legends to make that wonderful fantasy world of Middle Earth, which in the last 60 years has become popular worldwide, and especially through Hollywood movies. And a new television series coming from Amazon soon. So these new invented mythologies are quickly spreading around the world. But the greatest mythology of the 20th century wasn't fantasy, it was science fiction. And if you think about the famous movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick and written by Arthur C. Clarke, the great science fiction author, it's a great illustration of what science fiction has been giving us as a mythology. On the one hand, it's a brilliant illustration of technology, from the invention of the first technology as an ape man uses a bone as a weapon, and then through hundreds of thousands of years of history and the development of technology until human beings, having evolved, actually go out into space in these great symbols of science fiction, space rockets, the idea that our technology will actually take us out beyond the Earth and into the universe and to other planets and to meet alien life. And this has been the mythos that we have created for ourselves through science fiction. But also in 2001, we see the limitations of that mythos, and to an extent, our disappointment in it. That after the space race ended, we found that our technology isn't taking us into space. So Stanley Kubrick suggested that it wouldn't be technology that took us into space. Instead, we would become that great symbol of 2001, the cosmic space baby, the next development of human consciousness. And that's what would actually take us out of the atmosphere and to the stars. So we have these two great ideas now in this new Western mythology of science fiction: the development of technology and the development of human consciousness. And it's interesting how the Western mythology has started to look a lot like Eastern mythologies that came before it. In a way, all myths lead to the same truth, or must do if they are true. So if we think about the idea that's become very popular now amongst physicists in the Western world, that we live in a multiverse, that there are an infinite number of parallel universes that mirror our own, but are all slightly different every time a different decision is made on the quantum level. And you can define descriptions of these parallel universes in Buddhist mythologies, in the Diamond Sutra of the Buddha. Or another very popular idea coming out of physics today, simulation theory. The idea that our whole reality might be operating on a giant supercomputer within an alien civilization somewhere, which itself might also be a simulation running on some other computer. And the idea that we're living somehow in a simulation or a video game mirrors some of the ideas of Vedanta, that life is a game being played out between gods and reincarnated spirits. And the loss of mythology in the West means that we've reinvented from scratch many of the great religious mythologies through science fiction. And it raises questions about what we believe science and technology can achieve for us. I began writing about the need for an international science fiction back in 2011 when I gave a talk and a paper at a Dutch convention of science fiction and futurists. And my thinking at the time was that still Western science fiction was very Western in its assumptions, and that as a newly emerging global culture, we needed a global mythology. And my hope was that science fiction could give that to us. So I think science fiction now has had 200 years of inventing a new mythology for the Western world. And my hope is that through the rest of the 21st century, we will find new myths for the 21st century. And that these myths will join together many of the mythologies of great world history. And the myths of science fiction will no longer be so focused on Western culture, but will be global and will help us be more unified as people, not just between nations and between cultures, although that's very important, but also across cultures. Very often science fiction represents those people who want to advance and progress and maybe leave the Earth behind, like Elon Musk, to form a colony on Mars instead. But of course, there are many people who value older ways of thinking and older ways of living and who feel left out from new technologies. And I believe science fiction can help to play a part in unifying these different parts of our culture, the progressive and the conservative and the liberal and the traditional. And I hope that there will be writers from the Indian diaspora who become famous and well known around the world for doing that. And in my writing of criticism of science fiction, I'm very much looking for new writers, new myth makers, new science fiction voices from around the world and from many different cultures. And I hope that many of those in future who are receiving perhaps Hugo Awards or Nebula Awards will be Indian writers. So thank you very much for this information to speak to you on science fiction as a modern mythology. It's been a great pleasure, and I'll continue to listen now.
Thank you, Damien. Myself, Arvind Mishra. It's really a brilliant and very inspirational, thoughtful invocation about science fiction and mythology. There is one query from my side. what is your idea if many ideas in Indian mythology, if they are given appropriate technology, could they be could they result into something on which science fiction writers could write upon? What's your opinion?
Yes, I think Indian mythology has already informed a lot of science fiction. If you think about the great writer Roger Zelazny and Lord of Light, and that was an idea of how the gods of Hindu mythology might overlap with the future of humanity. Because of course, these are great archetypes of human behavior. The gods show us what we might become as our highest selves, and that's something that we think about in science fiction and in fantasy as well. And as we take technologies that are transhuman, that raise us above the human, if we think about the idea of uploading consciousness to a computer, well, then how will we live within those computers? Maybe we will take on new bodies and new identities and play out great fantasies. And they might look a lot like these archetypal patterns of Indian mythology.
Oh, very nice. Damien, I am going to deliver a lecture which is very similar to yours. And that was conceptualized by me as science fiction ideas in Indian mythology. So could I request you to be there until,
yes, absolutely.
because then we could work upon it later.
Okay.
To develop the concept even to wider acceptability and to greater levels.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, over to Dr. Balaji.